It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business, featuring interviews with South Carolina business executives, community leaders, and government dignitaries. Let's Talk Business is a truly one-of-a-kind business-to-business talk show. And now, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. This is episode number 19, by the way, and I am your host, Rick Jenkins. Glad to have you here. Whether you are checking us out on YouTube, or maybe you have downloaded our podcast on Google or Spotify or Apple, regardless of how you're tuning in today, I am so glad that you are. Today, I am talking with Reed Wilson. Reed is the CEO at PTG, or Palmetto Technology Group, and they are an internet solutions firm that is headquartered in Greenville, but doing business a little bit of everywhere. They provide fractional assistance for folks. If you need someone a day a week or a couple days a month, they can provide that. And they can also provide an IT help desk for you if you need that, and plenty of other stuff. Reed Wilson, how are you?
Excellent, Rick. Great to be back.
It is good to have you. You said be back, and that's right. You know, I was looking a little earlier. You were on episode number 3 in the very beginning, and so it has been quite some time, and we're all the way up to episode number 19, and you've come back to join us. I didn't scare you off the first time.
You did not. You did not. Congrats on the success of the program.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
For sure.
So before we get into business, I do want to ask a couple personal things. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of personal stuff because, like I say, we did that on episode 3. So go to the YouTube channel, go back, watch all the personal stuff. But a couple things. Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in a little town called Honeypath, South Carolina.
Right.
Very small town, just close to Anderson. Technically, Anderson County.
Yeah.
Live in Anderson now, though.
Yeah. And have you lived here your whole life?
Pretty much. Lived in Australia for a little while. Went to school down in Charleston, the Citadel. But Greenville, Anderson, Spartanburg, this is where my roots are for sure.
How long were you in Australia?
I was there for about a year. Yeah.
And?
It was great.
Was it?
It was amazing. Yeah, I was young. I used to work for a company in town, Data Stream Systems,
Yes.
and got the opportunity to go over there and help our sales team get started there in Melbourne, Australia, and it was amazing.
Did you do Crocodile Dundee stuff?
You know, I have one regret, and that is I did not play enough while I was there.
Yeah.
I spent too much time working.
Yeah.
If I could go back in time and tell younger Reed something, it would be go and enjoy enjoy the beauty that is that country. I did have one great trip where a buddy of mine, it's so funny, classmate of mine from Citadel actually ended up living 3 blocks from me. It was totally random. You
didn't know it before you went?
No, had no clue. And he lived there. He was literally 3 or 4 blocks from me. And he and I spent a week backpacking through Tasmania and did not see a single human for a week. It was amazing.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Well, yes, you should have had more fun.
For sure.
All right, so let's talk business. You founded the company in 2007, and we talked about this the first time. You know, it was like mid-07.
That's right.
And you fast forward 8, 9, 10 months, and now all of a sudden it's 08, and we know what happened in 08. Everything worked out perfectly fine for you, but I bet it was a little scary in the beginning.
Well, look, I wouldn't say everything worked out perfectly fine. There was definitely some scary times. But look, I tell my kids all the time, I tell folks on our team, you certainly learn more from hardships than you do from the easy times. And if you make it through, you know, when COVID hit in 2020, that was obviously scary times for everybody. But, you know, I think starting a business from scratch in 2008 really test your mettle. But we realized, hey, if we can get through that, we can pretty much get through.
That's the perfect way to look at it. Yeah. You got through that. It's all downhill. Let's talk about what you do and the services you provide. And one of the first ones I want to talk about, and I've talked about it with other folks in other industries over the course of the last couple months on this show, is fractional assistance.
Sure.
There are a lot of folks out there who can't afford a full-time whatever that is, right? Whether it's a CEO, a CEO, a CIO, or whatever, but you all provide fractional IT assistance. What's that look like?
Yeah, so our typical customer is going to be an SMB or organization, call it 10 to 200 employees. I think our largest customer is about 2,000 employees. But typically we will work with a customer that says, look, hiring IT people is really expensive.
Yeah.
And if I'm a 50-person org and I hire one IT person, well, the likelihood that that person's going to stay with me for a very long time is really low. So I get them all trained up. They get all the experience that they need. And what do you know, 6 months later, 12 months later, 18 months later, they leave. And out the door goes all of their institutional knowledge, right? And so they would work with an organization like ours in that we've got depth, right? There's 40 people on the team here in Greenville. And we support all of their IT functions, everything from basic help desk got a new printer I need help getting installed, or CEO got a new iPhone, all the way up to complex cloud migrations, and then security around those tools as well.
But do you provide them a specific person if they want a specific person?
Well, so we've done that in the past, and if a customer specifically says, look, I really like this person, we always do our best to try to align that up. Now, the problem with that, again, much like if I'm a business owner and I hire a single person and they leave, all that institutional knowledge goes out the door with them. We want to be really careful about that. We've got a handful of customers that, they might have the same person on site every other week or every Tuesday or whatever the case may be. We always want to try to drive consistency there wherever we possibly can, but we also don't want to have single points of failure, right? So it's a very, very competitive space. I'm glad to say we've been on the best places to work 9 or 10 years in a row, so turnover is not a huge issue for us. But the last thing I want to do is say, hey, Rick, the guy or gal that you've worked with for 10 plus years has got this great opportunity to go do something else. Right. Now out the door goes all that institutional knowledge.
Right. But if I call you and say, hey, look, I need an IT person to work with me one day, whatever.
Sure.
Right? You all can accommodate that
Of
type
course.
of request.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the desk, the IT desk, I never thought about that before. I never thought about being able to call or to hire some group to provide an IT desk. So if you're a small company and you got 10 or 12 people, let's say, but you don't have an IT department, and all of a sudden your computers are doing weird stuff one day, if they can call you guys, right?
That's exactly right.
Like a 1-800 type of deal?
That's correct. So we support our customers in a number of ways. Obviously, you could always pick up the phone and call. A lot of our customers choose to email in support requests. We do chat-based support, and we just do an online portal too. So it works pretty well for folks.
So, of course, you're going to be using smaller companies are going to be using this type of thing. The larger you are, of course, you're going to have your own staff.
Sure.
So we're talking about smaller folks. And I'm assuming that, of course they are. Smaller companies are going to be way more vulnerable to being hacked, I would assume, than large companies. It seems like it has died down a little bit. But a few years back, it seemed every single time that I was watching the news, some humongous company was getting hacked. And it was big news.
Yeah.
Has it died down a little bit because people are becoming a little more careful and vigilant about things? Or am I just not hearing about it as much?
I think this is one of those, I can tell you it's not died down. I think it's one of those things too, we've heard about it so much that we become numb to it.
Yeah. Right.
I also think organizations have gotten maybe a little smarter about how often they're publicizing that data, right?
Yeah.
If you're a healthcare org or a finance org, there's certain parameters of what you have to disclose. SMBs, by and large, are the largest attack vector for threat actors. Why? They typically have the least amount of resources to secure the infrastructure, and then once they get in, they typically go undetected for, I've heard numbers as high as 120 days before they actually are found inside that customer's environment.
And again, you're saying this is because a small company, you've only got, small to mid-sized company, you got 25 people, you don't have the resources to just protect yourself. I saw a statistic. 82% of all cyber breaches are caused by end users, but companies only spend on average 49 minutes a year training their employees.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so, obviously you hear about these security incidents that happen because of, a flaw in the software, right? Those things certainly happen. But by and large, what typically happens is some end user, typically because they're just moving fast, right? Like they're not doing it on purpose, is giving a threat actor access into that environment. The most common way this is happening is through business email compromise, right? They're either getting phished and they're giving up their passwords. We're seeing a ton of what we call display name attacks, where the email looks like it's coming from me, but it's actually coming from another email address. I heard an interesting stat this week. Everybody talks about ransomware, right? Yeah. And that's obviously very profitable, but business email compromise is growing at a rate of 2x that of ransomware, and it's more profitable.
And you call it business email compromise?
Business email compromise. Okay. That's when I as the threat actor, break into your company's email system, and then I can do all kinds of stuff. I can initiate wires, I can steal your customer data, I can get employees to do things that maybe they wouldn't do because it looks like it's coming from me.
Mm-hmm. Any idea, any feel for, of the percent of the total hacks, what percent come from small and medium And what percent large? I would guess a lot more small to medium, because the large are spending a lot of money to protect themselves these days.
I don't have a specific stat off the top of my head, but I would say anecdotally it's 3 out of 4, right? More often than not, it's the SMB that is getting focused. It's also, there's just more SMBs in the world than there are larger orgs. So
if 75% of the attacks, the hacking attacks, are occurring with small and medium-sized businesses, another statistic, 62% of small businesses do not survive a cyber attack. That tells me there are a whole lot of companies out there that are going out of business because they just get absolutely crushed by someone hacking into their system.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of scenarios that play in. I think the biggest one is you lose trust with your employees. You certainly lose trust with your customers. But most SMBs are woefully unprotected from an insurance coverage perspective as well. And recovering from attacks is incredibly expensive. And in most cases, the rider that your local insurance provider is giving you for cyber is not even going to scratch the surface when it comes time to do a recovery from a large scale attack. And that's why training is just absolutely so critical. We tell customers all the time, like, we can put all the great technology inside your business, but at the end of the day, you need to focus on the human firewall, the folks that are actually hands on keyboards, hands on their phones, and teach them what they need to be looking for to try to keep those bad guys out of the environment completely.
And you all provide that training?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. It's multifaceted. I think, think back on my sales days, right? We would go through sales training once a year, and magically, you were sales certified. And I view this as kind of like going to the gym, right? You don't go to the gym once and lose 20 pounds. You gotta go 3 or 4 times a week, and that's our approach with cybersecurity training as well. So we think the right approach is, whenever you onboard a new employee, you have a pretty intensive curriculum that walks them through kind of the typical ways that bad actors get inside their environments, and that's a pass-fail, right? And then we recommend that you retest those employees annually, and then on a somewhat regular cadence. Our recommendation is weekly. There's a small little micro training that gets delivered to their inbox. It's a 2-minute short video of what is MFA, what is phishing. What is vishing, which is actually voicemail phishing. The employee takes a quiz at the end of that 2-minute video, and those two numbers come together, their annual score and their micro training, to give them an all-up score. And our best customers pay attention to that score whenever we do a quarterly business review with them. It helps them identify who are the folks inside my organization that are taking training very seriously, and maybe who are the folks that aren't taking it as seriously.
Right. So, going back to the fact that you all provide this, and so logistically, what does that look like? A company calls you and says, hey, I've got 50 employees. Do they say, I want you to provide this training every time I hire somebody once a year, or whatever that looks like?
Yeah.
You all just get together and figure out what that plan is?
We fully automated the entire system, right? And so if you called me today and said, I've got 50 employees, what we do is get those names and email addresses of those 50s. We would enroll them in the system. About 2 days later, they're going to get their first training delivered into their inbox. Anytime you onboard a new employee, they're going to get dropped right into the same program as well. And then any of our account managers are going to work with that customer on whatever cadence they determine. Most customers are quarterly, when we review kind of what's going on inside your environment, what do you need to be thinking about from a budget perspective. But we always highlight these scores so that the business owner can know, hey, it can, as a business owner, it can be really tough to manage yet another thing, and that's something that our team can take off the business owner's plate.
So we talked about email compromise. I would think another place where people get in a lot of trouble is password issues.
For sure.
Yeah. And I always think I probably have 40 passwords, maybe a lot more.
Right.
Yeah, I don't even, sometimes I'm like, I forgot all about, I have an account there and I've got, what was my password and that kind of thing. So let's talk about passwords a sec. And what can people do to just be absolutely sure that they are password protected appropriately?
Well, look, if you've got 40 passwords, you're doing better than most, right? Because what we see typically is everybody uses the same password for everything.
All right, so let me rephrase. I have probably 40 or 50 places that I need a password.
Now you've just undone everything I've said here.
Yes, and now, and too often I use the same one. So tell me how bad I am and what I need to do to fix it.
Look, there's if I can get you one of your passwords, there's an entire subgroup of folks that sell that data, right? And so now if I want to target you, Rick, I'm going to take what I think is your email address, what I think is your password, and it's a technique called password stuffing, where I will put your username and your password that I think in every possible online service that I can. Bank of America, Chase.com, Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, right? And if I can get a hit there, now I have access. What's interesting about that is that once the threat actor actually has access, they typically don't do anything. What do you think they actually do? They sell that access to a third party who can now do whatever they want. They can execute a ransomware campaign, use business email.
So whoever's hacking it isn't usually the one who's taking it.
More often than not, that's exactly right. Correct. They're selling these known user IDs and passwords on what's called the dark web, typically for a couple of dollars at a pop. But there are, if it's a very high-profile user, you could get thousands of dollars from that user ID and password. So we tell customers all the time, do not reuse your passwords at all. You really should not reuse passwords. You should use a password manager. There's lots of different ones on the market. I don't think it really matters which one you use. What's most critical is that you use one that works with whatever you happen to be using, a PC or a Mac, and also works on your phone.
Give me an example of a password like Google.
Some password managers are Bitwarden is one that I see a lot of folks use. 1Password, Dashlane, LastPass. Literally, you can just go into Google and type in password manager, and there's a ton of them.
The reason I say Google is because you always get that message that pops up that says, "Do you want to save this password into your Google account or whatever?" And they give you the option of choosing inputting your own password or choosing a strong password that has 37 characters, and you're never going to remember that, and so you just put it in. But that's not what you're talking about.
Well, I think if you're not going to use a commercial off-the-shelf password manager, that one is good. One of the things that we see, though, is if your Google account gets hacked, now not only do they have access to your Google account, they sign into Chrome as you, and they've got access to every other password that you've ever saved in.
Okay, you're just scaring me now.
Well, I'm not trying to scare you.
You're just scaring me. If I get hacked tomorrow, I'm coming to you since we've had all this because it would be too coincidental. Yeah, that's a little scary.
It is, yeah. And in fact, there was a really big announcement. I can't remember the organization. I think it might have been Okta, which is an identity provider. That's actually how they got in. They actually phished an employee's personal account. He or she had saved all of their passwords in their browser profile, and then the threat actor was able to pivot from there.
All right, so you said there were all kinds of them, and you mentioned a few.
Yeah.
Give me one, and tonight I will do it. Give me one.
I would go LastPass or 1Password. Those are probably the two.
LastPass or 1Password.
Correct.
Okay. Last time that you were here, you gave some advice, and it was important enough that I wanted to touch on it again. You gave some advice to businesses. When you are starting your own business, and I've raised my hand, when you're starting your own business, you don't always have the money to do all the things that maybe you should do.
Sure.
Right? So you have to pick and choose.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm picking and choosing, or someone out there that is listening or watching is picking and choosing, give us an idea of what we should do in the beginning to maybe save us money down the road.
From a security perspective, or just all up?
You choose.
Okay. Well, I'd say from a security perspective, the first thing you should do is choose a good commercial email provider, right? Microsoft or Google are typically the way to go. Right after you do that, make sure you use all the default security parameters. The biggest one being multi-factor authentication, right? You should have MFA really on every account, right? Your Facebook account, even your personal Facebook account, your LinkedIn account, even though you're using unique passwords, you still want to have that second layer of authentication. I think the second kind of foundational thing that I would want to make sure that we're advising our customers to think about, especially in the early stages, is make sure you've always led with a security first mindset with your employees. what does that look like? Well, an example of that is Dropbox is great. Love Dropbox. I think it's a wonderful product. The free version oftentimes isn't exactly what you may want. So I would recommend that instead of using perhaps what might be freemium or free versions of cloud storage, you think of some of the more commercial options. The reason for that is typically you're going to have better support, you're going to have better security. Those would be the top two things I would recommend if you're just getting started.
Got it. So let's talk about something else that scares the bejesus out of me, and that is deep fakes. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording here, and we also touched on it just very briefly the last time you were here. But since the last time you were here, it seems like I read a different story all the time about this stuff, that it is becoming so good and so realistic and so easy, apparently easy to do, that, there could be so many bad things that come from this that you can't even think about them right now.
Right.
Tell me about deep fakes, man.
Well, if you're not familiar with it, it basically takes your voice or a likeness of you and places it in a different style of scenario. The most common one we see is, it's a recording of your voice calling your spouse saying, "I need money," or "I'm caught in this really bad scenario."
And hang on, just time out real quick. In the beginning, I only knew deep fake as video, right? And the way that you hear it a lot is in pornography, of course, correct? But only recently have I heard about the voice thing. And so let's stick on that for a second.
Sure.
So people can, well, one, how do they get your voice? And how do they turn that into something else?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert on any of this, right?
Sorry.
It's very much emerging technology. I think we all get calls pretty regularly of, it's a spam call, and you answer, and maybe they ask you a couple questions before you realize it's a spam call, and you hang up. We're all guilty of making videos, putting them on Instagram and making them public.
Yep.
We're making one here.
That's right.
Right? And so I think as artificial intelligence continues to become more and more mainstream and more cost effective, we're going to continue to see this happen more and more. I'm really hoping, I'm certainly not a fan of a bunch of government interference, but I'm really hoping we will start to see some government involvement here, because I think if you just think about, the personal aspect aside, the ability to share disinformation at scale, I think, is incredibly disruptive to local communities and, candidly, to our democracy.
Right.
It's scary.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so people can take it, but what amazes me is they can take your voice, but then turn it into, you're saying something else. So maybe I never say this sentence.
That's right.
But there is some way that they can take my voice and make it say that sentence. Correct. So it's not just that they're recording your voice, it's that they are doing whatever it is that allows them to do something.
Putting that into the machine learning and creating, an entire paragraph.
Right.
It's scary. I actually saw a great article on this where a gentleman recorded his voice, put into this large language model, and whenever a spammer would call, he would actually connect it up to this large language model. It wasn't even him talking. It was the likeness of him.
Right.
And he could keep these spammers on the phone for like 20, 30, 40 minutes.
That's hilarious.
It's amazing. Yeah.
All right, I'll get you out of here on this. You all have a webinar that's coming up in early December. And let me look here, Tuesday, December 5th at 11 a.m. And it appears that you are going to be sharing some information. You're going to have a client or two there, and you're going to share some information. Tell us what folks will learn.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. It's actually not us talking at all. We've got two industry experts from the cyber insurance world coming to talk about kind of what they see in the marketplace. We've got one that just does cyber insurance coverage only, specifically for SMBs. And what we see again is when these types of incidents happen, most organizations are woefully undercovered. So that young lady's going to talk through what you need to be asking your current provider. She's not trying to sell anything. It's really just like, here's the questions you need to be asking. And then the other panelist on that call is a lawyer that just focuses on basically hacks. So he's represented both sides. Right. And he's just going to talk through, like, how do you protect yourself in the event that you do end up in a scenario where you need to engage legal. So we're really excited about that. Like I think he says, coming up around December 5th. I think it's the kind of data that I wish I could have had a couple of years back. Definitely not a sales event. We're just trying to spread as much information as we can out to the community.
Well, it's valuable, and I'll make sure that I tune in. Folks, that is Tuesday, December 5th at 11 a.m. I would assume if they go to the PTG website, they can find all the information they need.
Right under the events tab, for sure.
Good deal. Rick,
All right.
good to see you, man.
Thanks, Rick.
Folks, that is Reed Wilson. He is the CEO at PTG, or Palmetto Technology Group. Thanks for joining another episode of Let's Talk Business. We'll see you next time.